Hello, good evening, and welcome back from the Islamic holiday and also the commemorative day of Africa Union Day on the 25th. That was a nice Monday holiday. Tonight we have two political issues for you. The first one is an assessment of what the matters that have been put before the Supreme Court. The big story in political Ghana these days is that the Electoral Commission has decided to go ahead with a new voters register. The largest opposition party in Ghana, the National Democratic Congress, is stuck against the new voters register. But more importantly, the NDC says that even if a new voters register should be conducted, the old voters register, the 2012 voters ID card, which was also the 2016 voters ID card, should be applied as one of the breeder documents. Now, the breeder documents are those documents that a potential voter tenders to the official of the Electoral Commission to indicate that he is a qualified voter, that is to say, a qualified Ghanaian who is of sound mind and who is above the age of 18. Those are the breeder documents. In the documents that we have been told is going to Parliament for the constitutional instrument, we have been told the Electoral Commission has limited the qualifications of subsidiary or breeder documents to two particular documents, a national travel passport and also a national ID card. The conversation around the table of the opposition is that both documents are inaccessible to majority of Ghanaians, and therefore many Ghanaians will be disenfranchised. These conversations have gone out on radio and television, newspapers and online. But now the NDC have taken a bold step. They have taken out a writ at the Supreme Court, invoking the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court under Article 2.1, Article 130. Urging and inviting the Supreme Court to make a declaration that, first of all, the Electoral Commission has not got power to do X, Y, Z. That rate by the NDC has been responded to by the learned Attorney General, represented by the Deputy Attorney General, Godfrey Dami. And in the first week of June, sometime next week, the Supreme Court will hear it. The first part of our analysis, the first part of our program today is an analysis on this case. What is the NDC asking the court to do? And how has the Attorney General responded to it? We'll show you what the NDC's case is and what the Attorney General's case is. And then you can make up your mind, or you can wait for the court properly. We should all wait for the court to hear what the court is saying. In the second part of the program, we do more of Ghanaian politics, and we take you back to our film, The Voices of Political Campaign. Tonight, we show you the campaign story of 1992, 1996, 2000, 2004, and 2008. We begin, however, with the aftermath of the 1979 election, which was the PNDC era, the arrival, the second coming of J.J. Rawlings. It's a film that has everything that you want to know about Ghanaian politics. And every time we watch it, we are so proud that we put it together. And I'm sure that you'll be so proud that it was put together right here from Metro TV in Ghana. Okay, so without much ado, let me get straight to the analysis of the matters before the Supreme Court. It is the NDC versus the Attorney General and the Electoral Commission. Okay, so let's begin by understanding the authority with which Ghanaians can go to court. I don't know whether I should call it authority, but let's understand on what basis people can go to court, and because the NDC has gone to court now. Under the 1992 Constitution, every Ghanaian is given the authority to go to the Supreme Court and challenge an action that has been taken by a Ghanaian who has state authority, like a minister, president, vice president, or an institution of the state, like parliaments, like the executive, like ECG, like VRA, like the Electoral Commission. So the NDC have gone to court on this authority against the Electoral Commission. Let's understand which part of the Constitution gives the NDC the right to do so. So we go straight to Article 2.1 of the 1992 Constitution. Now, this is the second article in the Constitution, means that it's taken very importantly, and it is thought to be a very basic fundamental power that every Ghanaian must have. Let's read it. So Article 2.1, as you can see, says that Article 2, Clause 1, a person who alleges that A, an enactment or anything contained in or done under the authority of that or any other enactment, or an act or omission of any person, is inconsistent with or in contravention of a provision of this Constitution, that person, such a person, may bring an action in the Supreme Court for a declaration to that effect, a declaration to the effect that the action complained of is inconsistent with the Constitution or is in contravention of the provisions of this Constitution. So So we get the basic understanding over there, don't we? Article 2.1 grounds the basis for the NDC to go to court. In this instance, the NDC are in court challenging the Electoral Commission's right to create a new voters register. So let's have a look at the case that the NDC is making before the Supreme Court so that we can understand it. And once again, to remind you, what we are doing tonight is to tell you the matter that is going before the Supreme Court. Sometime in the first week of June, the court will hear the matter. NDC has brought a legal action against the Attorney General and against the Electoral Commission, and they are asking for 2 or 3 reliefs. We're going to deal with that substantially tonight. And also, we will tell you what the government side, the Attorney General, is going to say in the court, or what papers that they have filed already in the court. We have received these documents from the documents that have already been filed in court. So they are documents that are now a matter of public record. So we're going to show you what the NDC is saying, and we're going to show you what the Attorney General and Defense will be saying to the court. So let's start first with the case that the NDC is making. So NDC is seeking fundamentally an original relief and an alternative relief. So that means that they're asking for something in its original form. If they don't get that, or if the court doesn't agree with them, in the alternative, they're asking for another relief. And what's the Attorney General doing? The Attorney General is responding to the matter. Here is the first relief that the NDC is seeking. So the NDC is seeking the relief as follows. They are asking for this declaration. They are asking for a declaration that, upon a true and proper interpretation of Article 45A of the 1992 Constitution, the second defendant, that is the Electoral Commission, has the constitutional power to and can compile a register of voters only once, and thereafter revise it periodically, as may be determined by law. Accordingly, and this according to the NDC, the Electoral Commission, that's the second defendant, can only revise the existing register of voters, and that the Electoral Commission lacks the power to prepare a fresh register of voters for the conduct of the December 2020 presidential and parliamentary elections. So you get the point that the NDC is making. They are saying that according to Article 45A, the Electoral Commission has the power to create a voters register only once, just one time. And thereafter, they can revise it according to law, or they can revise it pursuant to a law, like a constitutional instrument. So we don't know what the Supreme Court will say. We don't know the answer to that. This is what the NDC is saying. Let's go and look at Article 45A. Let's look at it. It says, the Electoral Commission shall have the following functions. A, and we're dealing with just A. The function is to compile the register of voters and revise it at such periods as may be determined by law. It says to compile the register of voters and revise it at such periods as may be determined by law. Now, the NDC is saying that to compile happens only once. To revise it, you can do it all the time. So the Electoral Commission does not have the power, as it is, because there's an old voters register, to compile at all. That's what they are saying. We'll hear what the court says. So that is the first relief sought by the NDC. There's a second one, and let's look at what the NDC is asking for in the second one, and that's the beginning of the alternative. So the NDC says that the Electoral Commission cannot compile a voters register. They're asking for the Supreme Court to make a declaration to that effect. If, in the event that the Supreme Court does not make that declaration, then the Supreme Court should consider something else, and that's what they are saying. Let's look at what they are saying. So that's on your screen now. It says, a declaration that upon a true and proper interpretation of the provisions of the Constitution, particularly Article 42, upon the registration of and issuance of a voter identification card to a person, that person has accrued rights to vote, which cannot be divested in an arbitrary and capricious manner. A declaration that upon a true and proper interpretation of the provisions of the Constitution, particularly Article 42 of the Constitution, all existing voter identification cards duly issued by the second defendant to registered voters, second defendant being the Electoral Commission. So they're saying that all cards having been duly issued by the Electoral Commission to registered voters are valid for purposes of identifying such persons in the exercise of their right to vote. So that's the NDC's second relief. So if you understand what they're saying that, well, if you don't agree that the Electoral Commission cannot have a new voters register, in the alternative, consider that under Article 42, persons who have a registered voters ID card, that voter's ID card should be considered as a valid document to be able to identify such persons for the purposes of voting. That's an interesting one. So they have the original and then they have the alternative. Let's see whether they are seeking another relief. And yes, they are seeking another relief, and that's also on your screen now. It says as follows: a declaration that the second defendant, being the Electoral Commission, in purporting to exercise its powers pursuant to Article 51 of the 1992 Constitution to exclude the existing voter identification cards from the documents required as proof of identification to enable a person register as a voter without any justification is arbitrary, capricious, unreasonable, and contrary to Article 296 of the Republican Constitution of 1992. So here, the NDC is going more direct, and they're asking the Supreme Court to make a serious declaration. They are saying that the Supreme Court should determine as illegal the Electoral Commission's basis for saying that people with a voter's ID card cannot participate in the election. They say that it's contrary to the Constitution and it's contrary to Article 296. Now, Article 296 talks about the power of discretion, the power of any institution to use discretion. Let's have a look at it. It says, where in this Constitution or in any other law, discretionary power is vested in any person or authority, A, that discretionary power shall be deemed to imply a duty to be fair and to be candid. B, the exercise of the discretionary power shall not be arbitrary, capricious, or biased, either by resentment, prejudice, or personal dislike, and shall be in accordance with due process of law. And where the person or authority is not a judge or other judicial officer, there shall be published by a constitutional instrument or statutory instrument regulations that are not inconsistent with the provisions of this Constitution or that other law to govern the exercise of the discretionary power. Article 296 is one of the very well applauded articles of the Constitution, in furtherance of good governance and in furtherance of democracy, etc., etc. It's an article that brings a limitation to the exercise of discretionary power, because throughout the Constitution, many individual authority holders and many institutions have been given the power of discretion. 296 actually regulates that discretion, and that's what the NDC is referring to. So these are the key points on which the NDC's application is standing before the Supreme Court. Let's now go and see what the response of the Attorney General is, as submitted to the court and as we have seen. And this matter is going to be ruled on by the Supreme Court in the first week of June, we understand. So this is what the Attorney General is saying. Attorney General's office is represented by the Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Godfrey Dame. This is what he's saying. Well, he begins on a technical point. So he has presented responses to the NDC argument. But before then, in terms of his brief before the court, he starts on a technical point. He starts by saying that the NDC have come to court at the wrong time and that their writ is incompetent before the court. Now, when lawyers say that, it means that you have no cause of action. The plaintiff has no cause of action. Typically, in constitutional cases, you would always have a cause of action because, as they say, your interest in the matter is with the Constitution or it's against violation. But here, the Attorney General is saying that the CI that the Electoral Commission has, the constitutional instrument that the Electoral Commission has put to Parliament, against which the NDC is arguing, has not yet matured, because that law will mature on the 5th of June. So that any time before the 5th of June, one cannot go to court and talk about it. And that it represents two levels of abuse if the court were to agree with the NDC and substantially rule on the matter. It says that it will mean that the court is usurping the authority of Parliament, because Parliament is yet to consider the CI. Maybe they will dismiss it, maybe they will uphold it. The Supreme Court cannot have a role in that process. The Supreme Court's role can only be invoked after the law has been passed. So until the law is passed, the NDC cannot come to court. And this is how he puts it. Very interesting language in the matter, in the document that's gone to the Supreme Court. He says in a quotation, talking about the fact that the NDC's writ is incompetent, he says, it is simply procedurally incompetent and not cognizable as reliefs that may properly be applied for pursuant to the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction under Article 2.1. And we read Article 2.1. Let me read it again. It says that the NDC application before the court, the writ, is simply procedurally incompetent and not cognizable because the reliefs that are being sought cannot be sought at this time. And he uses some big English. He says reliefs that may properly be applied for pursuant to the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction. So fundamentally, he says that the writ is incompetent. And then, as we identified before, he says also further on your screen, he says further, Mr. Dami submits that to entertain the NDC's action will amount to a usurpation of the courts, a usurpation by the courts of the power of Parliament to either annul the intended legislation or approve same becoming law enshrined in Article 11.7 of the Constitution. So Mr. Dami's first point of concern about the NDC is that he's asking the court actually to dismiss the matter. He says the court cannot even go into the merits of the matter. They cannot go into the merits of the matter to decide whether the Electoral Commission has power to do so, etc., etc., because he's saying that those powers that the Electoral Commission is asking for, or the procedure that the Electoral Commission is asking for, or the exercise of a new voters register that the Electoral Commission wants Parliament to endorse, that has not yet happened. What has happened is an expression of intention in a CIDAS before Parliament. No one knows how Parliament will deal with it. Parliament is an independent body that stands on its own, and the Supreme Court cannot get into the business of Parliament. So NDC should have waited. When the law is passed, then they can go to court. The Supreme Court will hear it. We don't know what they will do, but the Attorney General is saying that the NDC writ is incompetent because of that, that it discloses no cause of action. They have come to court at the wrong time, and they should be dismissed. That's his first point. So on the second matter, we already know what the NDC said. The NDC said that if you look at Article 45A, and we put Article 45A on the screen, and it said that the Electoral Commission has power to compile the voters register and to revise it at such times as may be determined by law. The NDC's view of the matter in this writ is that to compile is to compile only once, and to revise is subsequent. So the Electoral Commission, once a voters register has been compiled, they cannot compile another one. Let's hear how Mr. Dami and the Attorney General responds to this matter. And it's on your screen now as follows. This is what he says. He says that he's inviting the court to take note of the absence of any punctuation in Article 45A. That's interesting. We'll come and look at it. He says there's no punctuation in Article 45A, except a semicolon at the end. Quite clearly, according to the Attorney General, quite clearly, therefore, he says, without any difficulty, the words being to compile and to revise, the words must be read together. He says there's no need to disaggregate them. The Deputy Attorney General submits that by the ordinary rules of English language, the absence of any commas or punctuation at all in Article 45A means that all the words must be read together, and attempts to compartmentalize them should not be countenanced by the court, he says. So he's saying that if you look at 45A, and let's put 45A again on the screen. Yes, there you have it. It says if you look at 45A, there is no comma. So let's have a look at it. The Electoral Commission shall have the following functions: to compile the register of voters and revise it at such periods as may be determined by law. So to compile the register of voters and revise it at such times as may be determined by law. So Mr. Dami is saying here that because there's no punctuation, to compile and to revise can be done according to the periodically that the law uses. So you can revise it at any time and you can compile at any time. So he disagrees with the NDC that Article 45A is pointing the Electoral Commission to compile once and can revise later. So that's the matter before the court. I'm sure the court will determine that. Let's see how Mr. Dami responds to the other reliefs claimed by the NDC. Now let's come to the NDC second relief. And you remember the NDC second relief is that the Electoral Commission should not be allowed to use to exclude the use of the voter's ID card for purposes of registering people for purposes of 2020's election. And so they say that the voter's ID card should be thought to be a valid breeder document. As you know, the CID has gone to Parliament. From what we know, the Electoral Commission has excluded the use of the existing voter ID card as one of the valid documents. They're actually asking for two documents: the national identification card and a travel passport. And this is the matter. So the NDC is saying that the courts should disagree with the Electoral Commission that they cannot exclude the voter's ID card. We know that already. Now, what is the Attorney General saying about that? The Attorney General is saying that as far as the use of cards or any document for the purpose of election and registering people, the Electoral Commission has a discretion And he cites a lot of Supreme Court cases that have already emphasized that discretion. And later this week, we'll be looking at the Abu Ramadan case in some detail. But the Attorney General says that the Electoral Commission has a discretion. We already know that Article 296 talks about how a discretion is treated. But let's hear what the Attorney General said. He says there's a discretion for the Electoral Commission to do so. And he cites the following cases in the law, all of which point to the fact that the Electoral Commission's discretion in this matter is unfettered. And it's as follows. It's on your screen. So he cites to the court, he says the court should look at the following matters, because whether or not a card is used is fully within the discretion of the Electoral Commission. The cases he cites are Abu Ramadan and Nimaku number 1 versus Electoral Commission and the Attorney General, number 1. Then there's Danso Achampong versus Electoral Commission and the Attorney General consolidated, is all reported in the Supreme Court of Ghana Law Reports 2013-2014. And then there's Abu Ramadan and Nimaku number 2 versus Electoral Commission and the Attorney General, which is reported in 2015-2016 Supreme Court of Ghana Law Reports. And the Attorney General says that the functions of the Electoral Commission are functions that are of an independent body, and that the discretion is allowed, and so the NDC cannot argue against the use of a particular card or a certain card or another card, etc., etc. And those list of cases that Attorney General gives, he says, contain the Supreme Court's thinking about these matters that were just read, these cases that were just published in 2016 and 2014. So it's left to see what the court will do with this matter. But as I said, this week we are going into the Abu Ramadan list of cases, because those cases had a lot to say about the Electoral Commission and the voters register and the use of voters ID card, etc., etc. And we will be relying especially on the rulings that were given by Her Lordship Justice Georgina Wood, who was a former Chief Justice, and also the rulings that were given by His Lordship Justice Sule Badegbe. That's coming up later this week. So I'm sure that by now you know the case that's going before the Supreme Court in the first week of June. You know the NDC matter and you know the MPP matter. Well, let's wait to hear what the court says. But the students of law and legal journalists will be keeping an eye on that to ascertain the fact. If I get the date of the hearing, I'll publish it on our Facebook page. For now, I don't know, but we know that it's in the first week of June. That's it for now. So you heard that. You heard the two sides of the matter. You heard the NDC side and you heard the MPP side. We're certainly going to keep an eye on that. That's a matter of very high public interest, and we expect that the Supreme Court ruling will be lucid, clear, and that we can all understand it. We don't even know yet which panel of the Supreme Court is going to sit, but I'm keeping an eye on it. As soon as we get to know the panel of judges who are sitting and we get to know the date in the first week of June, we will publish it, as I said, on our Facebook page so that you can all follow eagerly. Maybe if the social distancing will allow us, we'll actually be in the court on that day, because this is an epochal ruling. And somehow with Ghanaian elections, I've noticed, since sometime around 2000, every year there's an election. There's always a very major Supreme Court case related to the election. That's always had in election year. In the year 2000, remember the big Supreme Court case that the MPP titled "No Photo, No Vote." Now, this was when the ID cards were didn't have photographs on it. The MPP were calling that there should be photographs on the ID card. In the film that we're about to show you, you will hear this matter. You hear Nana Akufo-Addo articulating this matter. You hear J. Kufuor articulating this matter. In the campaign of the year 2000, you see that they talk about no photo, no vote. That was a slogan of the MPP in those. It was a monumental Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court ruled that photo ID cards should be the only legitimate card to vote in election 2000. And we all remember that. Election 2004, there was some case. In election 2008, there was something I can't remember. In election 2016, of course, the Abu Ramadan list of cases were dealt with by the Supreme Court. And later this week, we are putting up a full documentary on what did the Supreme Court say in the 5 Abu Ramadan cases about the authority of the Electoral Commission and about the voter identity card that were issued as a consequence of the 2012 voter registration exercise. We're going to give you a full documentary on that. You can trust Good Evening Ghana to bring it up in a very big way. Okay. Now we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll take you back into politics, paying tributes to Ghanaian politics of the past and putting you in the mood for election 2020. After the break, I'll be here.
Hello, good people of Ghana. My name is Jacob Akwando, the PRO of Ghana Service. I strongly believe that we should stop giving names to people infected with COVID-19. It could be you, it could be me. Let's stop the stigma. Thank you.
There is 1 million excitement in the air, and Sapper just tapped into the mood with his share of waste bin from the 1 million waste bin project.
1 million waste bin project?
It is a nationwide social intervention project aimed at helping improve the lives of people by correcting poor sanitation practices and improving solid waste collection service delivery in Ghana by providing 1 million radio frequency identity tagged free waste bins.
Radio frequency identity tagged waste bins? This will enable monitoring of how often the waste bins are emptied in real time. Wow!
From your homes, offices, schools, hospitals, right through to places of worship. Yeah, baby.
How and where do I sign on?
Our branded registration and distribution officials will come along with their ID cards to register and distribute waste bins to all households. Just provide them with your name, contact number, house number, and digital address. Once signed on, you'll be introduced to your zone's designated waste collection service provider who will collect your waste on agreed days of the week.
Wait, is it free?
Yes, of course. The waste bins are free. You would, however, be required to pay a token as a registration fee at the point of registration and a monthly subscription fee as communicated by your service provider. Payment for such services can be done through mobile cash payments, short code *887*87# or through all Ecobank branches and payment platforms nationwide.
Oh my God, this is already getting exciting.
Yes, bro. With the 1 million waste bin project, you would enjoy improved solid waste collection,
Easy access to complaint services,
quick response to complaint, easy and convenient means of payment.
What am I waiting for?
What are you waiting for? Get ready to grab your free share of waste bins now.
You are still on Good Evening Ghana and it's live, and there's Tuesday, May 26th, and in a few months from now there will be election 2020. Of course, there's still the concern about COVID-19 and how it's going to turn out. It looks like the United States of America are primed for elections the first Tuesday of November. Soon we'll start our election programming, and as you know, on our election years, we factor in the American election as part of our election programming. So yes, we'll be doing that with the United States Public Affairs Department this year. We'll be starting soon. And also our consultant, Professor H.C. Kanku, will be here throughout the series to help us understand what's happening in America. Very similar situations. In America, the incumbent, Donald Trump of the Republican Party, is seeking re-election. In Ghana, the incumbent, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo of the Republican NPP Party, is seeking re-election. Incidentally, the Republican Party in the United States and the Republican and the NPP Party in Ghana all have the elephant as their symbol. Incidentally, since 1992, Ghana and America have voted the same way. That's frightening, isn't it? We vote in the same year, we vote the same way. When the Americans vote Republican, we vote NPP. When the Americans vote Democrat, we vote NDC. So check it out, 1992, J.J. Rawlings, NDC, Bill Clinton, Democrat. 1996, J.J. Rawlings, NDC, Bill Clinton, Democrat. 2000, J.A. Kufuor, NPP, George Bush, Democrat. 2004, J.A. Kufuor, NPP, George Bush, Republican, sorry. 2004, J.A. Kufuor, NPP, George Bush, Republican. 2008, Barack Obama, Democrat, Professor Mills, NDC. 2012, Barack Obama, Democrat, John Mahama, NDC. 2016, Donald Trump, Republican, Akufo-Addo, NPP. 2020, Akufo-Addo is running for a second term. Donald Trump is running for a second term. So that's going to be interesting. An interesting few months to come ahead. Of course, we have been heavily disturbed by COVID-19, and we're all trying to keep safe. And hopefully, each one of you is keeping safe. And rest in peace to those who have lost their lives, unfortunately. And we hope that not many will lose their lives as we battle COVID-19. Let's go back to those election photographs and those election videos, those things that made Ghana's election a welcome election and an election to watch in Africa. All the processes that had made Ghana's democracy stable is put together in this short film that I'm going to show you now. We begin tonight's edition from Parliament House, the old Parliament House of the Third Republic, where the winner of the 1979 election, Dr. Hilaliman had been sworn in, and the coup leader of the AFRC, Flight Lieutenant Rawlings, was invited by the Speaker of Parliament to give a final speech as he handed over power to Dr. Liman. Here is J.J. Rawlings speaking to Parliament. After that, you will see the era of the PNDC, you will see 1992's election, you will see 96 and thereafter as part of tonight's edition of Good Evening, guys. Sit back, get your popcorn, I'm getting mine, and we'll be watching. After that, I'll come back to wrap up. Here is J.J. Rawlings in Parliament House. Whilst Dr. Liman, the eventual winner, was actually a novice in politics, some of his contemporaries were not. Victor Owusu, for instance, had been part of the National Liberation Movement. William Oforiatta, also a member of the National Liberation Movement, had also served in the government of the Progress Party. Colonel Banasco had been particularly active in the government of General Kutua Champong. He was the agriculture minister responsible for the bumper harvest of the time.
Unfortunately, Buzia's group could not hold together. We got divided. We split into a Popular Front Party as against the UNC led by Pawele, and PFP led by Victor Osu. Incidentally, I had been the deputy to both men. Buzia appointed Victor Osu foreign minister, and I was the deputy foreign minister to Victor. After the first year, there was a shuffle. And Victor Osu was moved to the foreign ministry to be the attorney general, and Pawele was made the foreign minister, and I was retained as the deputy foreign minister. So the two men under whom the party split in '79 were men I served, so I got to know them quite well. But then on the other side, Nkrumah's tradition had regathered, and Mr. Liman, Dr. Liman, I should say, because he was a doctor, a novice in a way to politics, got elected as the candidate for PNP. That was the CPP changed, but the tradition was intact. And we expected that if we would come together, the Buzia party, we would take power. Unfortunately, we just couldn't make it. We went into the election with two parties, PFP, UNC, as against PNP. First round of the election, which was keenly fought, brought Liman leading, I think with 600,000 or 700,000 votes. Victor Osu followed with 538,000 votes. And Pawele brought up the rear with 300 and something thousand votes. Immediately it was clear that if PFP and UNC had stayed together, they would have taken the election one touch. But it didn't happen. But into the second round, the strange thing was that much of UNC went to join the PNP, and that brought Dr. Liman into power.
The PNP benefited more from the UNC, the CPP elements in the UNC during the second round, because the Volta region section, the Eastern region section, they all voted massively for the PNP in the second round. And if you go to the Central region also, the Action Congress Party people, they were mostly breakaways from the CPP, and they all went back to their roots and voted for Liman. That's why his percentage rose about 30% more, from 36 to 62, and Victor Usu's rose from just around 30% to just 38%. The People's National Party, about which I can talk more authoritatively, came with the idea that yes, we are the direct descendants of Nkrumah, we are Nkrumahs, etc. But then it doesn't mean that we are going to go lock, stock, and barrel for everything that Nkrumah stood for. And they relied a lot on the youth. The presidential candidate was only 45 years old. His vice presidential candidate was 46 years old. And many of the parliamentary candidates were between the age of 25 and 40.
The results of the election indicated that a combination of the Popular Front Party and a United National Convention could have given the right-wing political philosophy a significant boost, but will not have been sufficient to give them a first-round victory.
Of the people of Ghana, and to do right to all in this manner of persons.
And I remember going on a mission with Victor Osu to meet Yadima Lomi, and it was Dr. Liman who was translating for us. Within 7 years, things had changed, and Dr. Liman, who wasn't like in mainstream of politics, had become president of Ghana. And Victor Osu, who people expected to be president, was the defeated opposition candidate.
Those two people, if either of them had stayed in power without any military intervention, this country wouldn't be where it is at the moment. I will give that credit to both Busia and Liman. If you look at the things that they put in place to lead this country economically, socially, politically, everything, if things had been allowed to go its way. Of course, if, in the case of Busia, I wish he would eventually have allowed the CPP also to contest openly and on equal terms in subsequent elections, so that he wouldn't be accused of having been handed power on a silver platter, you know, so that there would be real competition. In the case of Liman, everybody had an equal chance to contest. But when you take the things that they sought out to do for this country wouldn't be where it is at the moment.
After Dr. Liman had sworn the oath of office, historians and political scientists remember a very fiery speech given by Flight Lieutenant Rawlings. Many analysts thought that this speech was threatening, but however you look at it, Rawlings was a very popular politician, or if you like, a popular military ruler at that time. He had liberty to give this speech.
We of the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, during our short stay in power, have demonstrated openly what many people had only suspected before, namely that the holding of office in government in this country had in almost all cases been used to plunder the wealth of the nation. While they were paying exorbitant rents, and while they were dejected and despondent because of the intolerable English language. Because of the intolerable heights to which inflation in the country has generally risen. Mr. President, we of the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council have faith in you and your government. We know you will deliver the goods. That is why we have turned a deaf ear to those who have entreated us to stay on a little longer.
So the Limann government began its administration at the end of 1979. Throughout 1980, there were rumors of coup d'etats reported all over the place. It came as no surprise then that 2.5 years into the government, noise and gunshots of coup was heard on the 31st of December 1981. Who was the leader in charge of this coup? Flight Lieutenant Rawlings. The government formed by Flight Lieutenant Rawlings was called the Provisional National Defense Council, the PNDC. It appeared to have started well in similar fashion as the NLC of Achampong had started. Agriculture, self-help, patriotism all became a mantra of the PNDC. However, after many years into the government, the advocacy for constitutional rule grew. The obvious hero of the advocacy against the PNDC to return the country to constitutional rule was a university professor of history, Adom-Otchere, who became a famous politician later on. The PNDC, feeling this pressure, began moves to return Ghana to a constitutional rule. Guzi Tano was one of the key actors within the context of the PNDC and within the context of the cadres, one of the groups the PNDC had formed that became the backbone of popular support for the government.
Around the end of the 80s, early 90s, there were calls for a civilian administration, quote unquote. And indeed the regime itself believed that it was time to test its popularity in terms of a new constitutional order.
First of all, there was an argument within the PNDC as to whether we could just return the country to constitutional rule or whether the PNDC should promote a political party. And I was one of the advocates of the PNDC for promoting a political party. I'd always been against the idea of the military by themselves ruling. I advocated very strongly that we should try and set up a political party which will promote the values of the PNDC. I said it's not enough just to get out of office. You know, we should, if you believe in what you are doing and you believe that those values were worth continuing, then we should set up a party that will continue those values. You see, eventually it was agreed upon. So we started working. And again, I advised my colleagues, I said, look, the PPA had been there, they have a tradition. The CPP have been there, they have a tradition. They have a network. We don't have any. So let us set up a network before we lift the ban. You see? So at the time, so they said, okay, it's your idea. You go and set up the network. So I laid with the foundation for the party before the ban of political parties was lifted. So when it was lifted, we were ready to go. You see? So it took a lot of people by surprise. How a small party like that became so big, you know, so quickly.
There were several court cases around the 1992 event after the referendum in which Ghanaians had popularly voted to return the country to constitutional rule. The opposition went to court against the political parties' law. In a writ filed by K.A. Gbedema, one of the old politicians of the 1969 era, he argued against the political parties' law and sought significant amendments to it. The case was led in court by Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo in 1992. All the opposition parties went to court to support Mr. Gbedema in this matter. J.A. Kufuor, Jani Selby, Lieutenant General Eskin, and Mr. B.J. Darocha were all in court to support this case. However, the court declined jurisdiction and the political parties' law stood as it is. After this event, political parties were awarded certificates and the game had begun. The ban on party politics had been lifted, and a few months from then, the elections of 1992 would occur. The election itself was contested by veteran politicians. Professor Albert Adom-Otchere represented the New Patriotic Party. Lieutenant General Eskin represented the PHP. A famous businessman and poultry farmer, Kwabena Daku, represented the NIP. The NCP, joined the NDC of J.J. Rawlings to form the Progressive Alliance. The campaign itself was feisty, sometimes even violent. Opposition leaders felt that the PNDC had not created a level playing field.
We were dealing with a government which was essentially a military government. There was an interim National Elections Commission in place. The political parties had no role in the electoral process, and you had soldiers all over the place. So it was a very strange electoral process, and it was difficult for us. And even getting weeks to the elections, I mean, the military conducted exercises, you know, and some of the exercises were deliberate to try and soften the ground, and then you get the NDC chaps go there with propaganda that if they don't vote for Jerry Rawlings, then something will be visited on the population. So it was a very difficult election. It was lopsided against us. If you looked at the news bulletins, most of the mileage of the GBC's coverage was on the incumbent head of state and the military leader at the time, and very scant coverage of Professor Dubois. Of course, when you talk about resources, it's even worse still. I mean, they had the largesse of having controlled the government for the previous decade, and therefore people were even scared to be associated with the MPP, and it needed courageous people. And that's when a lot of Ghanaian businesses had been collapsed systematically. And so business people were not upfront, were not courageous enough to come and say they are standing behind the party. Of course, there were a significant number who were supporting with resources on the quiet, using diplomatic back channels. So that was an election, that was an uphill task for the MPP. But considering the environment and the way the campaign was waged, and at the time, a lot of ethnocentric comments, and the Volta region essentially was a no-go area for us. And I quite remember traveling in a Dubois convoy and being stoned near Akachi and having to turn the convoy back. It was very difficult, and people in certain parts of the country didn't feel safe even to wear the MPP T-shirt. And so it was a very difficult election. But I would think that Professor Dubois acquitted himself well, and the MPP showed that this was a strong party that had roots all over the country.
Eventually, the National Democratic Congress, NDC, won a landslide 57% of the votes. The opposition leaders, dissatisfied with the process, boycotted the parliamentary elections of 1992. And so the NDC and the NCP contested the parliamentary elections. But why did the NDC win the presidential election?
With the kind of scientific work, the kind of organization, the polling and so on and so forth, which told us where we were weak, where we were strong, what the message had to be. You know, it was clear that the message of probity, accountability, development, unity were very powerful, and continuity to some extent, were very powerful mobilizing messages for our people. And as you can see from the election, he won by 58-point-something%, first round. And I think that he deserved it because we worked for it. But not only did he deserve it, because he had also given a track record, which showed that by 1992, Ghana was basically in single-digit inflation, 8%. Its economy had reversed substantially and had foreign exchange reserve in excess of 4 months of import cover. The macro environment was pretty stable.
We had opaque ballot boxes made of wood. Some of them were filled before they were brought there. We had ballot papers found with individuals. They became police cases, documented. The commandos were in charge of the process. People went to vote in the morning only to be told that you have voted already. There was no ink on the person's thumb, nothing to show that. But well, the person had been ticked. Somebody had come to vote, and that was the end of the matter. Many of our chairmen had been arrested. Honorable Biki Edu, for example, he was then chairman for Osu constituency. He was languishing behind bars. I was then General Secretary, I was then Secretary for Greater Accra and Chairman for this my constituency simultaneously. And so I was really in the thick of affairs. By 1 o'clock, we knew that it was not possible to win because we had no space to operate. The commandos were in charge of the whole process.
PNDC was popular. JJ was popular. And we knew that if we set up a party in his name and made him the presidential candidate, he would win the elections, which he did. That stolen verdict business is, usually people, when they lose elections, they always find some reason other than their own lack of good performance for losing, So I think that stolen verdict thing is not true. I was involved in the campaign. I don't know what that stolen verdict thing was about. Anyway, so subsequently we had other elections. And so what happened? How come they didn't come up with the stolen verdict for 96? If we could steal in 1992, why didn't we steal in 96?
Wait a minute! When we win, I want the victory to be for every Ghanaian, no matter which party they are in.
That I will uphold the sovereignty, the integrity of Ghana.
And help us to resist oppressors' rule with all our will and might forevermore. And help us to resist oppressors' rule with all our will and might forevermore.
The significant bit about the 1996 elections was that political changes brought about transparent ballot boxes for the first time. And enter onto the ballot for the first time was John Agyekum Kufuor, that old politician from 1969, also from 1979, now back on the presidential ballot, challenging Flight Lieutenant Rawlings for the presidency. Also, there was another very significant aspect of the 1996 election. Mr. Adom-Otchere, who was the vice president, as a result of fracas with the government of Flight Lieutenant Rawlings, was now the running mate of the opposition leader of John Agyekum Kufuor. So in fact, on voting day, whilst Mr. Kufuor was challenging Flight Lieutenant Rawlings, his running mate was the incumbent vice president, Mr. Adom-Otchere. Faustina Nelson, who was a member of the NCP administration that produced Adom-Otchere, explain to us what actually happened.
Surprisingly, the late Kweku Boateng, who was then the leader and presidential candidate supposedly of the NCP, he became resistant. He was very adamant and insistent on being the presidential candidate, and that he vowed never to play second fiddle to the NDC candidate, that was President Rawlings. So, as an impromptu decision, the seniors of the party, the Ahoys, the Chikatas, the Tetegas, and so on, just resolved. I believe they had this decision in conjunction with the hierarchy of the NDC then. So they brought in Aka, that because it was like Aka would play ball, and that he would agree to be the vice presidential candidate of the Progressive Alliance. The late Aka also started grumbling about, according to him, not being treated well. I remember that a few times that I went to him in his office at the State House, as soon as he saw me, he said, "Hey, Auntie Fosti, now what mama done mama me? I remember this vividly because he didn't say it once or twice. So there were apprehensions. The then chairman, our late Chairman Roland Atakesan. He said, so now the alliance between the NDC and NCP is over. Then we all shouted, yay, and that was the end of the alliance. But somewhere along the lines, the PCP decided to go into an alliance with the NPP. Then former President Kufuor was the leader and the presidential candidate. Some of us decided that we would be better off going to the NDC rather than, for instance, my decision was it would be better for me to go to the NDC rather than to go into that alliance. It was called Great Alliance. And so that alliance, by the arrangement, the leader or the presidential candidate of the MPP was to be the presidential candidate. And then the PCP presidential candidate, which was then Aka, would also be the vice.
The other important feature of 1996 was that Professor J.E.A. Mills, from nowhere and totally unknown to politics, became the running mate of Flight Lieutenant J.J. Rawlings.
And this was a Thursday, and filing was for the next Tuesday, and we still didn't have a vice presidential candidate. Professor Mills had just put in a bid for the vice chancellorship of the University of Ghana, and he had lost by 1 vote to Professor Ivan Adai-Mensah. Harry Sawyer was the Minister of Education, and he brought a memo to Cabinet asking us to reverse the decision of the University Council, and appoint Professor Mills because he was much better. And he extolled his virtues. In the middle of it, somebody told him that in this constitution, the government doesn't appoint the vice chancellor, it's the University Council, so it cannot be done. But he was very, very emotional about it. And the more he spoke about it, the more I said, Obed Asamoah was in the meeting, but he left before the meeting ended. So as soon as the meeting ended, I dashed to his office. He was Attorney General at the time. I said, Obed, this Professor Mills that Harry Sawyer was talking about, don't you think he's the person that we are looking for? Obed said, Jesus Christ, Kwamina, you are right. He's brilliant. I taught him. Yes. Why hasn't anybody thought about him? So he called Rawlings on phone, and they spoke in Ewe, which I didn't understand. At some point, he told me that Jerry would talk to me, so I took the phone. And then Jerry said, come there. I know the man. I have met him. His IR is coming. Go to his house. Whatever it takes today, I want him as a candidate. My wife is here. Ask her. That evening, as soon as she came home, because my wife goes to the same church with Professor Mills and the wife, Legon Interdenominational Church. So the two of us, we went. They were living on Legon campus. We went to the campus. When even Prof was not there, he came until about 10 p.m. And when he came, he said, well, this is my mission. His first question was, why me? I said, well, you are the Christian. Me, I don't go to church. But it means that God has chosen you to do something for the country. So up to 4 a.m. They agreed. So he said, okay, I should give him time. As soon as we got out, I told my wife that. Because what I did was that I let my wife be with a Prof's wife, and then I was with Prof. So when we came out, I told my wife that, I think that Adom-Otchere is Prof's mentor, because he mentioned him not less than 20 times. They were in the university at around the same time in the course of the conversation. So because of the time factor, let's go so that I go and brief Adom. So we got to Adam's house at 5 a.m. I went and woke him up. I said, look, this is the assignment that Rawlings gives me. This is what I have done. This is how far I have gone. I want you to continue from here. He said, I should leave it with him. So we left. 12:30, Adom and Professor Mills came to my office. Prof, they entered, he said we should pray. We prayed. He said he has decided to do it. That was convincing.
Thus, the election of 1996 was fought, and once again, Flight Lieutenant Rawlings emerged the winner of the election.
I will preserve,
and that I will preserve,
protect, and defend the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana.
And defend the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana. So help me God.
At the inauguration of Flight Lieutenant Rawlings, there was a big visitor to Ghana in January 1997. The Nigerian dictator Mohammed Sani Abacha arrived in Ghana to grandeur security. Something significantly happened which was positive for Ghana's future politics. The losing candidates of the election, John Agyekum Kufuor and Edward Mahama, after the event, went onto the stage to the dais and congratulated Flight Lieutenant Rawlings for winning the election. GBC commentator Edward Fache described the moment.
And I was just saying this is a good sign. And you see Mr. Kufuor shaking hands with Nana Akufo-Addo and Rawlings. This is a very historic moment. President Rawlings shaking hands with Dr. Edward Mahama. And isn't this a wonderful moment?
Thus came the election of the year 2000. Flight Lieutenant Rawlings was not going to be on the ballot anymore. The constitutional limitation of 2 terms was with him, and he will have to bow out of power. The NDC were looking for a new leader. Professor John Evans Atta Mills, the new political entrant, became the leader of the NDC. He chose as a running mate Mr. Martin Amidu, who was a Deputy Attorney General.
And as a police thing now Fred, I can say, young first time pay into a movement to mommy, Namin go to be Mbo Obia so Naedia, Obia Obedia on Peku.
On the opposition side, J. Kufuor was once again on the ballot, and he chose as his running mate Alhaji Aliyu Mahama. The opposition waged a massive campaign.
Over the past 2 years or so, about 30 women, 5 women have been killed, and they've got the trace of the culprit. The police are there. Ghana has got some very bad police. I respect Dr. Samoa, the lawyer, senior lawyer. But when it comes to the Constitution, we are in a position to tell it. What the Electoral Commission is doing is in accordance with the Constitution. There's nothing wrong about it at all. The Supreme Court decided on behalf of our unfortunate, underprivileged people in the rural areas who, for circumstances beyond their control, could not move to the district capital to go and exchange their thumbprint cards for voter ID cards. The Supreme Court has ruled that those people with thumbprint ID cards can never be denied their constitutional right to vote.
We could have taken to the streets also in a demonstration, because trying to deny people about 30% of their right to vote is a serious business.
For the second time in Ghana, an election had gone into a second round. This time between John Agyekum Kufuor, the opposition leader from the New Patriotic Party, and Vice President Professor J.E.A. Mills, the candidate of the National Democratic Congress. In the second round, John Agyekum Kufuor won over 56% of the votes cast and was duly sworn in as President of the Republic of Ghana. The NPP, the Dankwa Busia tradition, the PFP, or the UNC had returned to power nearly 30 years after they have been overthrown by the Achampong government. This time, they were led by one of the proteges of Busia, John Agyekum Kufuor.
I further solemnly swear
that should I at any time break this oath of office, I shall submit myself to the laws of the Republic of Ghana, and suffer the penalty for it. So help me God.
So help me God.
The real reason also was that we showed a division by the 2000 elections because of the Swedru Declaration, by which JJ had anointed Professor Mills as his successor without consultation. The cadres were totally dismayed and displeased. But the cadres decided to form a reform movement, and they thought that there needed to be some kind of internal party democracy. I mean, you have a situation where only one or two people make decisions. That was not acceptable, So we tried hard to, patch things up. And the meetings for trying to resolve this matter were held in this particular hall. I can tell you, the Guzitano and group used to sit over there. All the meetings took place here. And on the government side, I was there, Kwame Nahwe was there, Tutubi was there, and they said we tried hard to patch them up. But they would not listen. Now, that affected the fortunes of the party in 2000. I think if the cadres are not formed the reform movement, then they eventually went on and formed the Reform Party. I think if that hadn't happened, Professor Mills would probably have won the 2000 elections, but probably with a very narrow majority. But in a way, and Professor Mills was not probably, an attractive personality as President Kufuor. Politics, the personality counts. It counts a lot.
4 years later, in 2004, Mr. Kufuor had a successful government. He had achieved a HIPIC initiative for Ghana that had wiped all Ghana's debt. There was sufficient money to move the economy forward. People were generally happy with Mr. Kufuor's administration. Thus, he went into the election and won for his second term in 2004. Mr. Kufuor was sworn into office again in January 2005 to complete his second and final term as President of Ghana. Then came election 2008. Mr. Kufuor had done 2 terms, and the NPP had been sufficiently successful at it. In Legon, in Accra, December of 2007, 17 aspirants gathered to vie for the ticket. Eventually, but with a lot of difficulty, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo emerged the winner.
You have decided to confer the mandate on my modest person. I am grateful to you and want to let you know that I'll do everything in my power not to let you down.
With Akufo-Addo nominated as the MPP candidate, the NDC went to town on something the MPP considers a very, very dirty campaign.
We didn't sit down in our meetings and decided that we were going to run a very bad campaign, no, because we had gone through that already. And people didn't like us for that kind of behavior. So this time we wanted to appeal to a lot of people and show something very good.
Professor John Evans Atta-Mills, meanwhile, had chosen John Dramani Mahama to spice up his ticket.
He was the greatest. After our rebranding, that was when he was selected as our running mate. He brought a lot of people on board. I mean, people who really didn't want to know NDC came to join because of John Mahama. And he was the one telling us that we have to appeal to the people, we have to speak well, we don't have to be seen as a party that, I mean, it's always fighting and that sort of thing. So I think he brought a lot on board. His communication skills helped us a lot, and he was doing a lot of, in fact, I was working directly under him, and we were doing everything with him. I think he did well. He helped us win the 2008 election.
The campaign was hotly contested on radio, on television, on social media. There was a lot of music at both rally grounds, the NDC rally ground and the MPP rally ground. After the first round of voting in this most crucial election, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo was leading Professor Mills by 100,000 votes. However, he did not have enough to cross the 50% plus one vote that was required by the Constitution to make him the president-elect. So, the Electoral Commission called the election into a second round. Many MPP supporters were disappointed about this matter. They believed, even to some extent, that the incumbent president, J.A. Kufuor, could have done something about it.
I believed the 2000 election should have come our way. We should have won it. 2008, I mean, we should have won it. Because we had performed so well, economically, socially, the mood of the country was really sweet. Ghanaians everywhere wanted to come home. They were coming home from Europe, from America, from Asia, wherever they were. Unfortunately for us, we went into the 2008 election with some splits within our ranks. For instance, 18 of our members stood independent in parliamentary elections. Didn't help us. That didn't help us. If they hadn't done it, Nana Addo would have won one touch. Because even with all the splits on the count after the first round, he led by 49-point-something%. Needed only 23,000 votes to have won outrightly.
Professor Atta-Mills is in the lead, but as we said, the difference is such that the results of the time election could make a difference. So we have decided to run the election time on Friday.
Because of the remarkable record of President Kufuor and the ratings, his level of acceptability, people felt that we were going to win. The MPP on paper has the best political structure in this country, if not the whole of Africa, you know, because we are represented right to the minutest detail in every community. The NDC went about massive propaganda. I mean, I was listed as the third richest. You know, there was a list of people who had accounts in so-called Prudential Bank, and if you put together the cumulative effect of that, it was more than what the Bank of Ghana had.
I don't believe it. We didn't. I mean, did you see any advert that had somebody's bank account? No, we didn't. I mean, why would you do that?
So that was the story. Some people say, why didn't Kufuor declare a state of emergency? You don't declare a state of emergency. What something could Kufuor do? Stage a coup d'etat? That's not, Kufuor is a regular constitutional being. And by the Constitution, the Electoral Commission declares. If you disagree, you go to court.
I further solemnly swear.
I further solemnly swear
That should I at any time break this oath of office.
that should I at any time break this oath of office,
I shall submit myself.
I shall submit myself
To the laws of the Republic of Ghana.
to the laws of the Republic of Ghana.
And suffer the penalty for it.
And suffer the penalty.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And there goes the President. With 6 months to go for the next election in 2012, in July, Professor J.E.A. Mills sadly passed. He died in office as President of the Republic of Ghana. On the same day, according to the Constitution, John Dramani Mahama, the then Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, was sworn into office as President of the Republic of Ghana. The election campaign began and was in full swing. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo had been elected once again as the candidate for the opposition. He went into the election with incumbent President John Dramani Mahama, first time on the ballot. So much controversy surrounded the results of the 2012 election that it ended up in court. And in August 2013, the Supreme Court pronounced a verdict that legitimized President Mahama's victory in 2012 and made him substantially the President of Ghana.
In the circumstances, the overall effect is that the first respondent was validly elected and the petition is therefore dismissed. Our various judgments, for the sake of convenience, are handed over to the registrar of this court.
Whilst I disagree with the court's decision, I accept it. I accept that what the court says brings finality to the election dispute. We shall not be asking for a review of the verdict so we can all move on in the interest of our nation. Everything in my bones, in my upbringing, and in what I have done with my life thus far makes it imperative that I accept a decision made by the highest court of the land, however much I dislike or disagree with it.
I bet you enjoyed that, and join me and Metro TV, Good Evening Ghana, and Imani Ghana as we update this film with the events of 2016. By the time we published this film, supported by Imani, by the time we did the premiere, 2016's elections had not yet occurred. We have now gathered the material for 2016 and want to put it in. So we're going to put it in, and hopefully we'll do another launch. We expect that it will not be a Zoom launch because hopefully by that time COVID will be behind us and we can meet again. And then we can do another launch with 2016's data, 2016's video, 2016's lessons, all included in it as we prepare for election 2020. That has been Good Evening Ghana for tonight. Thanks for watching, viewers. Good night.